Okay. Let's see who is going to log in. Hello, everyone. We're about to start. Just taking a minute so that people can log in. So sit tight and we're going to start in a minute. You see the IKEA team is all ready. Hello. We're about to start. One more minute, more or less. See, people are logging in. Okay. Okay, so hello everyone, and welcome to today's Gala webinar. My name is Isabella Massardo. I'm content strategist here at Gala. And today's webinar is presented by the IKEA team. You see them all ready on the starting block. As always, we will have a Q&A at the end of today's presentation. And so feel free to use the Q&A box or the chat, whatever you prefer, to submit your questions for our speakers. And I would invite you to do so throughout the presentation as you think of them. As you know, the webinar will be recorded. I will send you a follow-up email with a link to the recording as soon as it is published. And this is all from me. I'm just going to leave the IKEA team to introduce themselves, and I'll be back at the end for the Q&A. Good luck, guys.
Yes, thank you, Isabella, and thank you for Gala for inviting us to hold this webinar on the very exciting topic where we will discover the Allen key to localization and how we implement the project management-less approach in that. So today we're here we will shortly introduce ourselves. So I will give a word to Johan.
Thank you, Anna. Happy to be here and happy to have the opportunity to talk about what we have done and what we are planning to do. And my name then is Johan Sporre. I'm the engineering manager of Global Language Services. And together with me from my team, I have Alessandra and Patricia. And by the way, I've been by IKEA for 8 years.
Yeah, I guess I can go next. This is Patricia Palladini. I've been with IKEA for nearly 3 years now. I'm typically in charge of the digital content localization, which is basically IKEA.com and IKEA app. Alessandra?
Yes, hello everybody. My name is Alessandra Binazzi, and I've been working with IKEA for 2 years now, just over 2 years, and I've been in charge of rolling out the TMS as well as implementation or localization of non-digital content.
Thank you, Jonas, Alessandra, and Patricia. And I'm Anna. I'm representing Intra-IKEA organization, Intra-IKEA Systems, which is the franchisor of the IKEA brand and concept. And in my role, I'm working with the language topic, translation and localization, also with our different franchisees and external partners. And I've been with IKEA. It's quite scary to say, but it's quite some years. I think over 15 years now. So that's us today. So maybe if we move to the next slide. So today we invite you to go with us in this, in our blue and yellow box in a way, where we will start with a bit of introduction, where we are, what are the kind of history behind the different IKEA organizations? What did we learn in our journey of localization and the different approaches that we took? What would be the conclusions from Intra-IKEA group case, learning about digital content localization, And not only that, but also, as Alessandra mentioned, what happens with other global and local content localization. What are the key takeaways at the end of this webinar, and also looking a bit into the future, what do we plan for? So that's a little bit of the journey that we will take you on today. If we switch to the next one. Yes, so I just wanted to explain or introduce a little bit our company, which is of course one brand, but many companies under it. And here you can see two companies that we represent today. As I mentioned, IKEA Systems is the company that is the franchisor, meaning that we own the IKEA concept and we franchise it to the different franchisees around the world. And not only that, we of course have different other global organizations that we give assignments to for the different parts of our business. So for example, here you see IKEA of Sweden, organization based in Sweden, responsible for developing, designing the range. Then we have marketing and communication, who are then taking the communication part and designing the content for communication or related to product range and marketing and other areas. Of course, we have the organization responsible for the supply and distribution of our products. So that is also quite, of course, big part of the assignment. And we have a strategic manufacturer. So we, of course, work with other suppliers, but we also have IKEA Industry, which are our factories. And then, of course, as I mentioned, we work with the franchisees, but we have our biggest franchisee, which is Inca Group, where we also cooperate on different assignments like developing e-commerce, logistics, distribution. And the Inca Group is also, of course, handling a lot of global assignments, as I mentioned. And yeah, the responsibility with meeting the customer is also sitting quite a lot with the Inca Group and different developments in the technology side, investments, and many other things that are happening in the Inca Group. So it's great that we collaborate together. And if we move to the next slide, yes, so on this map, what I described before, you can see it more visually, the whole franchise system and value chain as we see, but also it's good on this map, you can see also, as I mentioned, Inca Group, of course, is responsible for 33 markets. So it's the biggest franchisee and also performing global functions, but we have also other franchisees in different areas of the world. The recent one that we opened is Falabella, which is in South America, in Chile, and then there will be expansion in Peru and Colombia later on. But you can also see there are different companies that are responsible for markets all over the world that we also cooperate with, and that we provide our concept for them to open the stores and e-commerce in different areas. So that is just for you to understand the global reach that we have, and it's quite exciting place to be in. And if we move to the next one, and I think here I will hand over to Johan.
Thank you, Anna. So in Inca Group, we have three parts. We have the Inca centers, where we have the meeting places, where we have an IKEA store, and then we are building malls around the world. The other part is where we have the Inca investments. They are the ones that are investing for the future, so that what we earn is something also invested for the future, so that we can continue to expand. And the third part is then the IKEA retail in the middle. That is where we have all the customer meeting points, and where we then can serve them in an omni-channel mode. And what we also have here in the IKEA retail, that is why we are here, is because in IKEA retail, we also have the digital organization where I and Patricia and Alessandra work. So this is us. And just to give you a bit of how many stores we are then having, these are the numbers that we have for calendar year 22. So calendar year 2022 ended in August, and then you can see that we have about 392 stores. We have 73 shops and planning studios, and this is then expanding. And then you can see we are written here in 32, and I think that this is due to that we have closed in Russia, that we only have 32 markets right now. So then you can read more about the items. There are more information that you can read about the Inka Group on inka.com. And that's about where we are and where we are working out of. So Anna, please start sharing a bit on where we started in relation to how we build the multilingual capabilities.
Sure, thank you, Johan. And indeed, as I mentioned, we at a certain point of time, of course, we discovered that there is quite a lot of content that we produce, both internally and of course externally, and it's great content, but of course we have the need to localize it to be able for our customers, and also co-workers, which is more than 200,000 around the world, to be using this precious content in their business, for their education, and many more. So that's when we realized we need to have we had certain ways of working in different areas, and it was working for certain types of content. We had some relationships with the countries and also with some external vendors, but we realized that in order to build for the future and to scale, we need to have an approach for the multi-language and what kind of capabilities we need to build in order to develop it further. So that's when we came up with this idea of multi-language approach, which is kind of covering all these different topics together. And one of them is, there was of course a need to have an efficient and quick way of making content available in local languages to the many co-workers, but also customers. So that's when we looked into different ways of translating using translation agencies, external translation agencies that are working with human translation, but also started to see, okay, is there a way that we can use machine translation to support us with these big volumes of content? The second pillar in that is that we were also looking into how can we simplify and also find easy ways to manage translation and to also have this transparency into the workflows. What are the costs that are associated to these different steps in the workflow? So definitely there was a need to have a common translation management tool or capability, I would say, in place. And last but not least, it's not of course only the tools and technical capabilities, but it's also the organization and different competences that we needed to develop, to put in place. How we manage the processes and ways of working to make this approach a reality. So that is more, I would say, about the people side. And we had this kind of vision back then that we would like to provide the capabilities both on organizational and digital level, so more the technology part, that would enable unique IKEA content to reach many people in the language that they understand where they are, which of course is quite aligned with our business idea and our IKEA vision. So that's a little bit of background where we came from and how we started to collaborate between also IKEA and Inka and the digital team.
And I think that is where I then start to talk about our journey. And because this is really what it's about, because I can't tell you from any point of who has said what, because it has been, and we have been involved in this together, this concept. So, but anyhow, I think it's important to know that we are the tech guys. We come from technology, and the beautiful girl here at her side, she's eating, just so you know, she is eating the veggie dog, just so you know. And this really about is what we come from technology, and for us, technology is really an enabler, and that is giving us possibilities to do things that we perhaps did not think that we could do, or in a couple of years ago wouldn't imagine that was possible. And when I then think about how we look at translations, and me then coming from logistics, it's really about that translation management. This is really like a goods flow, a logistic flow. It's a flow where we have then the information flow and we have the goods flowing. So we know that we have these components. And I think what is the beauty about translations is really that they go in the same application often. They use the same type of capability, but their transportation is happening at the same time as the information. So for me, this really connects back to my logistic background, but also knowing that in the logistic background is always that we are dependent on humans. So it's also all the time, it's about people, processes, and tools. So these are key for us. So there should always be human there, but it should be the right place. So when we look at this and looking then to where we started, it was really about working with the machine translation capability, the way we started this in 2018 to implement it. And it was really about making it an adaptive way so that we could make incremental changes. And a number of people have heard my story about the forklift in Spain, which actually is called, now I would not pronounce it, but actually we realized that Toro in Spanish is the same as forklift in IKEA. And that was a beautiful thing, because that we really realized that we needed humans in the loop, because this was really about when we made people communicate with each other. So you can see the coworker is connecting with the coworker, and each of them can use their language. And that was really the start when we saw that this can be done. And then at the same time, we saw that we can use this in other places. And also at that time, I think we were quite hardcore that we can solve anything with MT. Anything we can solve in machine translation. We're very hardcore at that time. And then there started to appear people in my team. And I think we started to realize that there were other opportunities where we actually needed people also. We needed improving capabilities of the MT. And then we started to get in hold of the digital content. And then Patricia came into the team, and she said something about PMless. That she really stated this, PMless. And we started to talk about this. And okay, because from the developer side, that's no problem. Really let the developers take the control of the translation flow. So we started to work on that, and we saw that this was good, and then started with looking at other types of content, and Alessandra onboarded, and we started to expand this, but we really started to see that, yeah, we have the capabilities. Now let's merge them in to see how do we get them to be more process-oriented. Because again, people, processes, tools, people's in the right place, that is our key. Because we started looking to this, okay, this is our process. Let's see how we can implement it. But then we really also look into how can we simplify it and make it so simple as possible for the users, so that we can see that we have 3 types of user groups. We have the internal audience, where we can see that, yeah, quite more simple messages, not that much need of a touch on it. And then we have the broader audience also internally, and we have the external audience. And out to the side, you can see that we have then different stakeholders in partaking part of the process. So this led to this, that when I had a conversation with another team member, that was Elena, she looked into this and said, okay, but perhaps it looks like this. And really, this is the simplified workflows we have, where we have, okay, not that much. We really need people just to understand. Okay, just run real-time translation, our adapted machine translation that we have with it, which is an adapted to IKEA tone of voice, but it's also secure, so we don't share any data, because that is key for us. So we took the RTT, as we call it, and then we combined it with certain post-editing in some steps where we just need, okay, we need it to be internal facing and at a certain quality. And then we have the whole process flow really coming into the extent where we really use the entire competence of IKEA to make it possible for the people in the countries, because this is what we wanted to enable from the beginning, because the translations by IKEA has been managed by the many. So it's really, how do we make this more systematic? How do we get everybody involved? So we have worked a lot on these technology sides to make it work to involve the many. So when I look back now at FY22, which was then starts in September 2021 and ends in August now this year, these were results that we machine translated quite a lot of words. And also then in relation to the number of ones that we then combine human and machine, we have quite a lot too, about 67 million. But I'm really fond of the 2.2 billion because that when I saw that number, that was amazing. So this is what we have achieved in this time. So a short overlook of what we have done. So this is what we have done and how we have thought about it. So now I think I hand over to Anna to talk about the inter-IKEA localization and the achievements you have done.
Yes, thank you, Jon. So if we move to the next one.
Working and clicking now.
So of course, as Jon mentioned, we've also been cooperating on this topic of how we make the process more efficient and what are actually the developments that we can do to fit our needs in localization at inter-IKEA. And just to say that mostly we are working with the internal materials like e-learning, a big e-learning platform, but also not only that, different kind of knowledge sharing, and but in a way also sometimes it's external facing communication as well. So what we saw that in order to be building for the future, we also needed to change our ways of working. And with the help of the technology, with the help of the different workflows that we started to use, we actually managed to move more to this kind of product mindset. And this is something that is, of course, connected to the agile ways of working, which is now being implemented in some areas, maybe earlier than in others, but that's the way how we started also to work. Focusing on product teams, and we didn't really see projects as something that is having a start and an end date, but it's something that can be evolving over time. So it's really the switch from this transactional approach to the product approach. And then, of course, where the most efficiencies could be happening is then when we see there are a lot of repetitive manual tasks that are occupying people's time. And when you hear somebody saying, okay, if I'm doing a certain task over and over again, and it's very tedious and repetitive, that means that, of course, there is a potential for it to be automated. So that's where we switch this approach to be technologically minded and focusing on implementing automation where it creates value. And last but not least is, instead of focusing on parts of the process, which we were probably doing, and of course it's important to focus on that continuously also in the new approach, but it's better to be overseeing the end-to-end workflow. And that's where the capabilities that we were building were supporting us to have this transparency and to really see, for example, if we see a challenge, what part of the process it is in, how does it impact other parts of the process or workflow. So it's important to have that, to have that visibility. So those were the main movements. And if we switch to the next part. Yes, so we talk, of course, a lot about automation. And what is it? Of course, if we really have the definition of it, it's really the process of making the localization process faster and more agile by automating specific tasks in that process. And that's what I mean when I talk about creating value. Of course, we should really think where should we automate and where it makes sense maybe not to automate. So I don't know, for example, maybe it doesn't bring so much value to use machine translation only for some very creative marketing content, because it will just maybe, doesn't bring any good to it, but creates some obstacles for writing that text. But of course, it might be a better use case where you can use machine translation. So that's one part of the process. Then what we also looked at as preparation, even before we, for example, use machine translation, is to see where we could integrate to different source content systems. We have multitude of different systems, as you can imagine, in an organization as big as IKEA. So we tried to see how we can make that process more automated instead of sending files via emails, via different file shares. So that part is quite important to be as much automated as possible. Then if we look more into the workflow and when the translation is actually happening, that's where we see if there in any steps can be automatically assigned to the different parties involved in the workflow steps. So you don't have to do it manually or follow up on it manually, but you have a certain system in place where you can easily track it. So that's when we come to the next part, tracking of progress, timelines, where certain content is in a different stage. So that is, of course, also very important to have a supporting system in place. And then last but not least, of course, it can also, there are many other moments that maybe you can think of from your experience, but one of the things that we were focusing on is also to implement the translated content back into our content management system, authoring tools, apps, you name it. So wherever the content is sitting. So that is also quite important. So those are, yeah, I think we've managed to reach some of those cases. So if we switch to the next part. So this is just, I wanted to share some of the main improvement areas that we saw the results of the capabilities that we implemented and what did they bring. So this is the data, quite high level on last fiscal year. So actually, if we look at especially the e-learning projects that we are localizing, it's quite a big process if we take it from the process of development to implementation. And that's what we managed to see, the reduction in time that it takes to translate an e-learning. We're still on the way. It's still quite a lot of time, but of course here we talk about different steps in the process, including context review, including post-editing, proofreading, different quality checks. So of course, those are the weeks that are going into the process, but we are reducing it quite a lot. When we talk about costs and money, we managed to reach around 50% savings in overall costs compared to previous years. And that's quite amazing, I must say. And of course, this is due to a centralized system that we're using. It's due to using machine translation and of course, building the translation memory. So that all the results of that we see in our projects. And last is operations or handling of the files. So now we see that we can use these semi-automatic ways, which also help us to eventually to reduce the time, but not only the time, but even the effort of people who are involved in different roles in that process. So it's great results, and we are looking forward to further developments. And yeah, now I hand over to the team.
Yeah, now this is my part, digital content localization. Next slide, please. So as we already mentioned, by digital content at INCA, we understand everything which is going to be shown in IKEA.com or in the different apps that we manage, like for example, IKEA app. We also include certain apps which are for internal use for coworkers, and also those apps that you will find in the kiosks or in the different areas that you will typically interact when you are in any of the IKEA stores. So what we want to show here is that for digital content, we have been able to set up a continuous localization workflow where we have connected the digital product teams. Those are the developers developing all these apps behind the app. And the IKEA app, the content creators in INCA and Inter working in different content management systems. And also all the developers that also work in Inter and INCA web content management system. So we have set up a connector to our centralized translation management system, which is also connected to real-time machine translation. So that means no matter which content source we are using, digital or any other content source, like Anna mentioned, could be, for example, e-learning. Everything will be managed in the same TMS. So that gives us visibility of the work on, that gives us leverage, consistency, etc. In this TMS, we have the market teams. Market teams are co-workers in the market, which are the experts, the subject matter experts of the different apps, and they are supposed to participate and to validate the translations, and obviously also the translations agencies, which they have been trained on IKEA tone of voice and IKEA terminology, so they can basically provide translation in a quick time, with a very quick response. And based on the workflow, the translation will be validated by the markets, or some markets basically do not validate the translations. So as you can imagine, this is a fully automated process where the translation request is kick off either at the digital product side or at the content creator. So inside their own application, or the CMS or TMS where they are developing their environment or the different applications, basically they kick off the translation request and all the process starts. Next slide, please. Just to give you some figures, we have on board more than 60 digital teams, 16 teams of developers on this process. We are onboarding them so they connect the development environment with our TMS, and they kick off the translations through command line interface. They also have GitHub for synchronization. In order to request a pull and pull request, they can also request translations or create translation jobs through API. And we are also connecting Figma. We are using a Figma plugin, so we can connect to the TMS, and the translations can start at a very, very, very early stage of the development. We have more than 200 projects. 200 projects means different apps, which are basically, as we already mentioned, behind IKEA.com or IKEA app or these other co-worker facing apps. As today, we have more than 500 users working on the digital TMS, on this connector that we have created for digital. We have 3 workflows that has already been described. It could be purely machine translation. It could be the machine translation plus agency translation or market validation, or you can have a long one for more customer facing, which is machine translation, agency validation, and market sync up. We work with the global translation agencies, which are onboarded in the workflow. So basically they get an email notification with a link so they can start the translation. There's no need to share files or share, send any email information. We don't have any project manager, zero project management in the all end-to-end process. But we do have a support team where we support the markets or the digital teams in case they need to be onboarded, they need to request question, if something has to be adjustment, if a workflow have to be changed, etc. And we do that through a business support portal. So again, we reduce the communication on email or any other channel which is not purely collaborative. And I think I'm going to pass it over now to Alessandra.
Thank you, Patricia, and thank you, Johan. So I'm going to talk about the global and local market content localization. If we can move on to the next slide, please. So showing a similar diagram than Patricia showed, just, the players in it are definitely different. So we're talking here primarily about offline files, so non-digital files. They're not necessarily in a CMS, in a repository of a specific kind. In some cases, there's lots more variety here of types of content and files, etc. So a little bit less of a controlled environment. So we work directly with the stakeholders, either global content stakeholders, so global teams that create content to then be distributed throughout the organization. And usually we work with, when we talk about offline files, these are standard formats primarily. So, what a normal TMS can handle. And then we have local content. So these are, country-specific content, market-specific content. Here as well, we have specific stakeholders in country that we work with. And what we do for this type of content is that we actually connect the stakeholders directly with our TMS, which you see here in the middle. The TMS is a big part of the GLS Hub. The GLS Hub is the entire infrastructure that we are building around localization. So it has several different elements in it. You can see here at the top, IKEA real-time translation. This is where we have our IKEA trained MT engines and we deploy them. And they're, this is of course fully integrated with the TMS, so we can deploy through the TMS seamlessly and also leverage from our TMs at the same time. So the global and local content is plugged in directly in the TMS. Of course, on the other side, on the right-hand side, you see our language resources. So whether that's translation agencies or internal language proofreaders, or maybe IKEA SMEs, so subject matter experts in different areas, they are all also onboarded and plugged into the GLS Hub. So everybody's really working from one central location. At the bottom on the left side, you see also some IKEA custom content. So this is content that lives in repositories that are proprietary to IKEA. So the formats are usually custom formats. They're not necessarily standard files or standard formats. So in many cases, we actually funnel this content through our IKEA file translation portal, again, fully integrated with the rest of the GLS Hub. So machine translation engines are plugged in here. In fact, this is also our internal kind of IKEA Translate site where people can access our machine translation. And in a more advanced portal, we actually can process these specific custom formats that IKEA produces. You do see one person icon here. In fact, this is not a completely PM-less process, and it probably will not necessarily become one at the local level specifically. We do have, historically, we have dedicated localization PMs in these markets, so they already existed as roles. But what has happened since we have rolled out the GLS Hub throughout the organization is that the role of these PMs has elevated quite dramatically. So first of all, they are our first line of support at the local level for users, requesters, as well as reviewers, as well as agencies. They also now have full access to all the data that we provide from the GLS Hub. So that makes them much better informed localization advocates. They advise on business decisions. We rely on this community quite a bit. We survey them often. So it really helps us stay in touch with what's happening even at the very local level. They contribute to task forces regularly. One good example is they are developing an LQA program completely, developed by them, by this community of localization PMs, and we didn't have an LQA program before, so it's really empowering. Another initiative that they're completely driving at this point is upskilling of requesters and reviewers, and we'll talk about upskilling a little bit more, but they are really taking charge of some of these initiatives, especially because they're the ones who are using the tools on a daily basis, so it's great that they get involved also in upskilling other stakeholders. Johan, let's move on so we can look at some numbers as well. Maybe click again, please. And one more. Yeah. So let's look at those numbers like we did for the digital content. On the global content side, of course, IKEA, so Anna is considered global content. So they're fully onboarded. We do have 2 global teams currently, and we're working on 3 more that we are onboarding. We cover all inter as well as Inca languages. So there's, a large number of languages here. 3 global translation agencies, the same one as for the digital content. And on the global content side, we do not have project managers. We do have the support team. I did not include it in this slide, but just like Patricia talked about, we do have a support team that supports these stakeholders after we roll them out in the GLS hub. Local content side, we have rolled this out to pretty much every income market. There's one missing, and also to 3 non-IKEA retailers. Anna talked about a few of these earlier, like we've rolled out to Chile. We've opened Chile. This is one of the new retailers that we're rolling out to. So we're starting to do that as well. We're covering 36 languages on the local content side, 3 global agencies. We have local vendors here as well because of the retailers. And we do have 1 project manager per market, as I talked about before. And at the bottom, it's just showing how this different content is plugging into either the TMS directly or the file translation portal. So let's go to the next slide and talk about some key takeaways that we've learned over the past somewhat years. Let's take a look. Johan, move on to the next slide, please. So we have actually grouped these takeaways in two main categories. The first one is a user-centric approach. And we're really talking about primarily our co-workers, right? Our IKEA co-workers are user-focused. So first of all, we want to make sure we focus on benefiting our co-workers. So the main goal here is user experience. So the vision of the GLS team is to simplify multi-language communication for the many. And simplifying here is the key term in this vision statement. So at GLS, what we strive to do is we want to really find the right balance between process complexity, which we have because of all our systems and formats and stakeholders, but also user experience. So if we ever have to make a call between process complexity and usability, the trade-off, always weighs on the side of usability. Next up is dry run in implementation. What does this even mean? What we found is that we try to use simulations to get users to work in the GLS tools as quickly as possible. So get them really to use the tools hands-on instead of offering lengthy instructor-led training sessions. So really get them in the tool and practicing and playing around with it. And then the last piece of the puzzle, but that is, goes along hand in hand with the first 2, is an upskilling staircase. So we have designed intuitive and self-service upskilling methods by user type. So each user type can follow kind of a self-service path to continue to upskill their knowledge of the GLS hub and how to work with it, and also localization in general. Let's move on to the next category of takeaways, please, to the next slide. Harmonization, we have realized works really well here, so we have adopted it as a best practice. And what does this actually mean? We've realized that despite the many ways of working that we have discovered as we talked to different stakeholders and we looked at different content types at IKEA, we realized that about 80% of these use cases could actually follow predefined processes that we set up. So this really simplified a lot of the work because we could streamline these use cases and kind of direct them to these predefined processes. But what about the remaining 20%? We didn't just want to ignore that, right? And abandon that. what we've done is for the remaining 20% of the use cases, we pretty much define some customization paths for them, because ultimately we really want to cover 100% of our user needs. Also, what has helped with harmonization is the broad adoption of MT. So by allowing or enabling access to our IKEA trained MT through different ways, whether it's the file translation portal or through the TMS or through the digital integrations, this has significantly increased the adoption of MT across IKEA, and therefore it has allowed us to seamlessly pretty much reduce cost and time to market without a lot, affecting the user that much. In fact, that the numbers that Johan talked about are pretty significant, and Axis has had a lot to do with that, with those numbers. And last but not least is user plugin. So we've talked about the PM-less approach a lot, it's in the name of this presentation, but this does not mean that we want to eliminate the human from the process completely at all. In fact, we're doing this for our coworkers primarily. So the coworker input may be still very crucial, both at content deployment as well as at language validation. And we have seen this over and over in the diagrams that Patricia and I have showed, and Anna as well. So what we're trying to do is we want to empower the coworkers to automatically plug into the process wherever it's relevant for them. So let me move on to the next slide, Johan, because I know we're reaching time. Just very quickly, I want to talk about the main challenges also that we've encountered, because it's not always smooth sailing, as you know. Pretty obvious ones, actually, no big surprises here. Identifying key stakeholders and big business owners is a big challenge. IKEA is a very big organization with lots of different pieces, franchisor, franchisees. So it's a world to navigate for sure. At the same time, same reason is also difficult to identify prospective projects. So we have covered quite a lot of content now with the GLS Hub, but not all. So there's still parts of IKEA content that are not included in the hub yet, is not processed through us at all. And we're trying to find those. It's not always easy. Because of all these stakeholders, of course, change management is one of our main challenges, and we work on this daily. And finally, finding simple solutions to complex scenarios. As we talked about before, we have lots of different pieces of the puzzle that we need to connect, and it's not always easy to find simple solutions. So we're really touching the tip of the iceberg, as we say here, but as much as we can, we want to present solutions that are easy to follow, on the front end, and that's the reason also why we may have to design really complex processes in the background. And I'm going to pass it on to you to close us out, Johan.
Thank you, Alessandra. And I think that what you said about the tip of the iceberg, yeah, I think that's what we are talking about. And I think that Bronna in my team, she challenged me once, and she said, I think that we have a fivefold our machine translation in 3 years. So just imagine 12 billion machine translated words in a year. Wow. And then just imagine if we are translating 67 million words combining human and machine. Yeah, just look at the numbers. So what is coming next? We are really looking at simplifying the user interfaces for the many. We will have all these capabilities in the middle, but it's really about that people should be able to access it from anywhere. So we're knowing that people, they should not bother about what's happening inside. That's our worry. Let them focus on what they need to do. They need to translate stuff. They need to live in the happy world I lived until 4 years ago, before I entered this world and met all these beautiful people I met during these years. They really understanding the complexity. And also I have a huge respect for the craftsmanship that exists in this business, in this localization business, a huge respect. So it's really about how can we then keep the people outside using our solutions, just access them, don't need to bother what's happening inside, They just know it happens. That is what we're aiming for. And what we then have set up as a vision is that we want to enable an inclusive multi-language omnichannel experience. So that means that we are challenging just not the omnichannel experience, but it really should be an inclusive, and it should be possible for anyone to connect to IKEA in their preferred way. So that means that we are also in their preferred language. So that means that we want to also to include everybody who lives with an impairment, so that we know that they can connect with us and communicate and do it in a simplified manner. Because we have 3 beliefs in our team. It's about simplicity, it's about consciousness, and it's renew and improve. These are 3 of our IKEA values. We are bearing them in mind all the time. So that is why we say that when we want to simplify multi-language communication for the many, this is really what we want to believe on, that what we believe in, what we are about, what we are achieving together. Because it's an effort together. And now I hope you all, thank you, Patricia, Alessandra, Anna, thank you all who has been here. And I hope we've been able to transfer our learning on how we together can reach our coworkers and customers better and faster with our PMLS approach. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, IKEA team. That was really interesting. I'm impressed by the billions of words that you guys are already translating. Let's see whether there are some questions from the audience. I see someone had raised her hand. I'm going to see whether she has a question, or maybe not. If you have any questions for the IKEA team, you can either raise your hand and I'll open your microphone, or you can type it in the chat. Let's see, usually it takes a couple of seconds. Or maybe it was something so overwhelmingly interesting that nobody has questions for now. You can always contact the IKEA team later on if you want to keep the discussion going. Let's see. No? No, you overwhelmed everybody with your wonderful presentation, I think. So for now, I don't see any questions. Yeah. Thank you so much, guys. It was really impressive. And let me remind everybody that we have a call for proposal for Dublin 2023, which closes tonight. So if you're thinking of sending a proposal, hurry, and that goes for you too, IKEA team. Next week, we are going to have, oh, my colleagues just said, no, it closes tomorrow. Okay, it closes tomorrow. So you have a little bit of time and you can do some work in the weekend to work on a great proposal. Next week, we have another webinar on the 27th. We have Lucrecia Harap, Paulo Guimarães, Jessica Radke, and Patrick Nunes, and they're going to talk about the all-important topic of growth, inflation, rates, and everything that is connected to that. So I hope you'll join us then. Thank you all again. It was really great, and see you soon, hopefully. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.